Today on CityCast Austin, for lots of us, these freezing temperatures can be scary. We all remember Winter Storm Uri. So we're talking to someone in the Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management about how they keep Austinites safe during emergencies. It's Tuesday, January 21st. I'm Nikki Devon, and this is what Austin's talking about. Hello, I am here today with Sarah Henry, Interim Chief Administrative Officer of HESM with the City of Austin. We are going to talk emergency preparedness. Hi, Sarah.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. Okay, so right off top, what's the biggest misconception Austinites have about preparing for an emergency, you think?
That's a great question. I think, we live in Central Texas where historically we have not had weather extremes. There hasn't been extreme winter. We haven't had ice and snow and all of the things that come along with that. As climate changes happen, our summers are now more extreme. So it's always been hot, but now it's hot to a level that is, dangerous. And so I think people who are from here, like you, like me, we're just not used to all of this. And so we've had to make adjustments to prepare and to accommodate the impacts of climate change. And then Austin has just so many people moving here all the time that folks come from places that have seasons. And then they get here and they realize we don't have season. It's hot all the time. And when it's cold, it's real cold and you weren't ready. So I think people who've been here for a long time have a hard time adjusting. And I put myself in this category. It's taken a long time to realize what, these more extreme weather impacts look like and how to prepare for them personally. And I think when people move here, they're just not ready. And we work with special events across the year as part of my role at the Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. And we see people who, in the springtime and spring festival season, that's when people think it's a great idea to move to Austin because the weather is great that time of year. But then you get down the road a month or two and it is tough. And then you've got folks who come in for fall festival season thinking it's going to be fall and it is still 110 degrees outside.
Exactly.
So people just aren't used to what we have here in the Central Texas area, and it just takes time to acclimate.
I think you're right. I think that a lot of people move to Texas with the expectation that, we don't have winter. Sometimes I genuinely think that there's some people that it's like, oh, there's no winter in Texas. And then not only do we have a winter, but it is winter that we are often not really prepared for because of climate change. So we don't have the snow tires. We don't have all of the things. So what do you think are the biggest risks facing Austin, like the Austin area specifically, when it comes to weather and other emergencies?
I mean, the thing about the Central Texas area is we have a series of hazards that we can count on to be, consistent every year, or at least we know that there's an increased risk of them in the Central Texas area. So we're in what's called flash flood alley, which means it's the way that the Highland Lakes and the Colorado River work. There are dams that go all down the waterway. And as flooding happens upriver, they open up those dams and then there are impacts that happen downstream. And so, we work really closely with organizations like the LCRA, for example, to understand what those dam impacts are and so that we can anticipate flooding. But then there's also the local tributaries that can flood. And so flash flooding is an issue here. We've seen floods over the years. Wildfire is a huge risk that we have here. And with everything that's going out in LA right now, I hope folks are paying attention. That wild urban interface, which is called WUI, it's where the development and nature meet, so to speak. And so as Austin continues to develop, we continue to tear down these fields and farmland and put in housing and other developments, that increases, or that encroaches upon, rather, the space where there is development and the space where there is wildland. And so all of that vegetation puts us at an increased risk for wildfire. And we are very unique and special in that our Austin Fire Department has a wildfire division. So there's people who wake up every day and think about how to mitigate these risks and how to prevent wildfire in our region. And so we're very lucky that we have that resource. Hail and severe weather are a big deal here. And so that's usually in the springtime. You start to see those thunderstorms that come out of nowhere. It's sunning and raining at the same time. And, we've seen $1 billion worth of hail damage in our region. Tornadoes are something that we didn't used to see here. There was no tornado in Round Rock. Tornadoes were something that happened in Dallas or Oklahoma, but we didn't see those this far south. In the last couple of years, we've seen tornadoes in Round Rock. Hurricanes are another issue. While we are inland, we are the point-to-point evacuation city for Galveston. So if there are hurricanes that hit our neighbors in Galveston, we have an agreement with the government there where folks can come here and be sheltered. So we may not see, the same type of impacts as a coastal community from a hurricane, but we do keep a close eye on that because we want to support our neighbors around Texas. We have been in a drought for a really long time. If you're a lake person and you like to go out to Lake Travis, or if you are fortunate enough to own property out there, you've probably had to adjust your boat dock a time or two. So, we've got some huge impacts here in our area. And these are things that we can expect. And these are, not man-made disasters, but these are, climate-based disasters. But that's one side of our house. So we're the Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. So on the emergency management side, we're looking out for things that are weather-based disasters, climate impact disasters. On the other side of the house, we work really closely with partners at the federal level to support homeland security, so man-made disasters. So this could be, domestic terrorism, any sort of threat that could impact people's, daily lives. So we also, on the other side of the house, we have man-made risks. And so we manage a program called the Bomb Making Materials Awareness Program. And this is an outreach program for businesses who sell precursor bomb-making materials. And people can make bombs out of all kinds of things. And so we want to educate business owners and their employees about those risks and how they can report that suspicious behavior. Listen, we're not trying to get people to tell on each other, but what we are trying to do is ensure that people understand what risks there are out there and how to report those risks so that we can stay safe.
I am absolutely trying to get people to tell on each other because I don't need nobody making bombs. That makes me very uncomfortable. But
I'm telling you, the depth and the breadth of the things that our office manages is really incredible. We have such an impressive cadre of staff and expertise.
Yeah.
And, a little known fact is we are part of the City of Austin's public safety suite. It's called the Big Three in Houston, right? We got police, fire, EMS. We're not the first ones in, but we're usually the last ones out.
That's true. I want you to tell us about HESM. So again, y'all, it's so Homeland Security and Emergency Management. It is an arm of the City of Austin. Get into a little bit of what you guys do, how does it work, and what you are.
So essentially what our job is to support the community whenever there is a disaster. We work with the emergency management teams and other departments. We make sure people have training around the region. We work with our universities and state partners to ensure that there's consistency in how that's managed. We train elected officials when they come on board so that, the folks who are at the front lines for, being accountable and responding to the community understand that language and understand, what resources are available and how things work. So that's part of our goal or part of our job is to make sure everyone has that common operating picture and can use that same language when it comes time to respond in an emergency.
So let's talk about how your team mobilizes for these situations because, I've had a little bit of an inside look and it's fascinating. We used to live together. Our desks were back to back. And so we both, during the pandemic, were on calls. And so there are a lot of times when I would hear what was happening. So let's talk about how you mobilize, talk about the control room and where is it and what happens and all that good stuff.
So we don't call it the control center, Nikki. We call it the EOC, which is the Emergency Operations Center. And that is located at a building called CTEC, which is Combined Transportation, Emergency, and Communications Center. It's where we house our 911 operations. So it's a secure facility, backup power, water, generators, the whole nine. And the idea is that, on a day-to-day basis, we want to be communicating with our partners to understand what's happening. And really, the Emergency Operations Center is the home or the hub of where we coordinate emergency response from. And so during an activation, what will happen is that we will bring in, our staff, our team, as part of that command staff or leadership team. And then we will also have leadership from all the public safety agencies, police, fire, EMS. Depending on the emergency, we're going to have other departments like Austin Water, Austin Energy, Transportation, Public Works. You're going to have your finance folks there. You're going to have your public information team there. Public health, really just depending on what the emergency is, you're going to bring in the types of resources that you need. We also, from there, have a space for amateur radios. So let's say that the cell towers go down. We've seen this happen before, especially if you're down at a special event. A lot of cell traffic. So what will happen is we can bring in an organization called T-Cares, which is an amateur radio group. And what they will do is we tested this during Eclipse. They will go out to the rural areas where there aren't as many towers or aren't as many resources. And then we will be able to radio relay. So this radio will go to that radio, will go to that radio. So we can still communicate to each other, but it's a way that we can communicate without all of the technology that we depend on, no phone, no internet. And so an interesting thing to think about, though, is that not every emergency or disaster requires the activation of the EOCs. Whenever there is an issue or an incident that needs response, our public safety agencies are able to do that. And they respond to emergencies all day, all night, right? And they're able to take care of those incidents within the existing resources that they have. Where HESM comes in is where we start to see the incident is so large or impacts the entire city. It's a citywide impact. And then we need additional resources. Those may be from the region, those may be from the state, and then some of these larger issues like, the pandemic is a great example. Then we're looking at the federal government for additional resources. So we would bring in support from agencies like FEMA, for example, which is where you see with these large disasters, hurricanes,
Right.
wildfires, you see FEMA coming in to help.
So, okay, tell us about some of the emergencies and situations that you have responded to. What stands out in your memory?
So I've been with the department for 2.5 years. So there's been, just within the last 10 years, a storm a year, it feels like. And so it used to be that this department had about 13 staff, and they maybe had one EOC activation, Emergency Operations Center activation a year. We are now have 30 full-time staff. And then we have a cadre of what we call disaster reservists. There are a lot of retired city folk, a lot of retired firefighters, chiefs who come back and they make up our disaster reservist team. And we pull these guys in to help in emergency response. It's about 50 people.
Wow.
And then when there's an emergency, we pull from resources all across the city. And the city has, I want to say, something like 16,000 employees. So during Winter Storm Uri, which if you remember, this is what people call Snowmageddon. It was also during COVID, so we were deep in lockdown, and at the same time, many people lost power for over a week. There was a boil water notice at that time. It was a really hard time for our community overall. Everyone who was in Austin at that time has a story about something that they experienced for that week and how hard it was. And my story from that experience that I'll share is I got a call from the guy who was in my position, who was my predecessor, and he said, "We need help. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough resources. We need help." So he put a call out, and I said, "Well, I can help. I have four-wheel drive. I can go down there." So I was leaving my house and driving down Manor Road, and it was iced over. So as soon as I started going down, four-wheel drive does not care about ice. I started just fishtailing and going down the hill sideways. And there were these two guys in a giant pickup truck, and they were kind of helping stopping cars with their hands and helping people get over into
Of course they were.
the road. Of course they were.
It's Texas. Of course they were.
They helped me. I get pulled over, and I'm talking to them. They said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going to CTEC, which is where our Emergency Operations Center is." I said, "Well, we're firefighters. Get in. We'll drive you." And so I was prepared to hike the 2 miles to CTEC, but these guys picked me up and took me in. And boy, I tell you what. And that's just one example of not only the city and how the community comes together in disaster, but really how the public safety team comes together and supports you. It's really a beautiful thing. I don't think people know how well and how fortunate we are all of our chiefs and public safety folks
Yeah.
work so well and so closely together. We're very fortunate in Austin to have that.
Winter Storm Uri is still really fresh on Austinites' minds, and I think it comes up again every winter. What did y'all learn from that experience? What did the city or HESM learn from that experience that changed the way you do things now, or if there is anything?
Yeah, it's a system of constant continuous improvement. And essentially, every major disaster that we've had over the last 10 years, there's a process for it. I mentioned National Incident Management System, where we get input from all the people who helped with the response of what went well, what didn't go well, what do we need to change. And then over the year, we take a look at what we needed to make improvements on, and we continue to work on those issues. Sometimes there's funding for them, sometimes it's little stuff, sometimes it's big stuff, right? And so those things obviously take longer. But what I would say is, we learn from every event and we make improvements for every event.
So I want to piggyback off that too. And, I was guilty of this too. After the fact, I was like, where was this? Why wasn't this happening? Why didn't some magical person come and swoop in and drop down and let us know that this was happening? And because there's always this wanting to point fingers, and anytime there's something tragic that happens, we are always looking for a why and a how. But I learned a lot of really important things about how you guys work so hard to inform us and to let us know when things are happening. So let's talk about this. In cases like a deep multi-day freeze, how does the city notify Austinites about what's going on? You guys, you kind of try everything.
When you say we try everything, if there's something we haven't tried, let me know, because we probably would try it. A lot of resources have gone into public information and emergency communication the last couple of years to really make sure that we are doing everything we possibly can to help people prepare. Part of that are lessons learned from these last events. So we're having to re-envision, what does mass care look like with different resources and different players at the table. And there's lots of ways that we try to get information out to the public. So on the preparedness side, we do what are called emergency preparedness pop-ups. And we do these every single month. They're at libraries all over the city and every council district. So we have geographical equity. We're trying to get to everybody where they are. We also do classroom-style trainings. It's a 2-hour classroom-style training where folks can sit in a room and they can learn from us and the fire department and all the other folks who are involved with a particular hazard. And then we do supply drives. So we work with the utilities during winter, and we do supply drives to make sure folks have winter supplies. We want to make sure that our plans are inclusive, that we have information that's available in every language that people need it. We actually translate our emergency information into 14 languages. Every bit of emergency information that goes out in English also goes out in Spanish, and we page it out in ASL so that people can sign up for a service called AHAS, and they can get a video on their phone of someone interpreting that message in ASL so that it's accessible. We have a website called readycentraltexas.org where we can teach you how to prepare for every single type of hazard. There's all kinds of resources there. If you don't want to go online, you can come hang out with us in person. And then organizations reach out to us all year long and say, hey, can you come teach something to my neighborhood or to my church or to, whatever organization they're involved in. And we will go out, we will create a custom training for that audience to help with preparedness.
These pop-ups are really, I feel like it's one of the most clever things I've seen come out of the city personally. I think it's just very clever. It's like choose your own adventure, learn what you need to learn, and also take all of these supplies so that you can keep yourself and your family safe. So I'm just saying, y'all might want to pop in on those pop-ups. Seriously.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the idea behind it is you have the experts in the room. So every month you're going to see folks from our staff, from Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. We live and breathe emergency preparedness all year long. So you're going to get our neighborhood preparedness guide, which is the only thing you have to read. But it will help you make a plan with your family. People are busy. They got kids. There's dinner. There's homework. There's happy hours. There's things to do. We don't want to be thinking about emergencies all the time. It's only when it hits us we go, oh, whoops. But this allows you to make a plan with your family in advance. If we get separated, where are we going to meet up? If something happens in the neighborhood, how are we going to take care of our neighbors?
Exactly.
How do we make a plan with our block? If it just helps you kind of think through just the logistics of an emergency and what you
Hmm.
would do in that moment. So you're not trying to figure it out in the middle of the
In the moment.
emergency. And if you just have your phone numbers written down and things, so if your cell phone goes down, if all the things we rely on every day aren't available, what would you do? The neighborhood preparedness guide is available and will kind of help you and your neighborhood make a plan. And then you're right, there are supplies. So there's what we call an emergency supply kit, right? And there's all kinds of personal items that you're going to want to add to that. Do you have an additional 7 days of medication, 7 days of food of water, a little bit of cash, stuff for your kids, not just their food, but entertainment, snacks for them? What about your pets? Do they have special dietary needs? Do they have medication? So having all of those things sort of pre-packed in your house, right, which can feel like a lot. So we recommend that people do this a little bit at a time, and then when you come to these pop-ups, you get the basics of these supplies. You get your emergency radio, you get a heater blanket, you get, your power charging devices, courtesy of Austin Energy. All these things that they add up. It's not cheap. And so you can get them
Yeah.
for free and they can be your starter kit. Then when you go to add those little personal things to it, it's a little bit more manageable. It's like eating an elephant one bite at a time. It doesn't feel like this giant thing you have to now add to your plate. You can just do this little thing, and all of a sudden your anxiety is lower. You know what I mean? You thought through what you're going to do, so you feel a little bit more control. And that's what we want people to do for preparedness. You have the
Yeah.
power to take the control to prepare, because I'll be honest with you, we're not coming in to save you.
Yeah. That's not how it works.
We can't save everybody. And
Yeah.
that's not
That's
a
not how it
popular
works.
thing to say. And I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings or make anybody mad at me. But we've got to change the attitude around this. You are responsible. If you can help yourself, help yourself. You need to
Yes.
save the government resources and the public safety resources for the people who cannot help themselves. Let us focus on those folks. And if you can help yourself, please do.
Exactly.
And we're going to help. We're not going to send you off to the wolves. We're going to help. But we've got to take some personal responsibility for our own preparedness when it comes to emergencies.
Help me help you.
Exactly.
So you mentioned earlier LCRA um, as one of the partners that you work with, and also all of our public safety people that exist in the city. Who are some of your other partners?
So we really work to coordinate with all city departments, agencies, including city leadership, elected officials, city manager's office. So all of that is within our span of folks that we coordinate with. Then outside of the city, we've got your regional agencies, state agencies. So you've got Texas Division of Emergency Management, who's our state emergency management partner. And then on the state side, you also have the Texas Office of Homeland Security and Texas Office of Bombing Prevention. So we work with those guys. We work with all the law enforcement agencies, including, at the federal level, FBI, Joint Terrorism Task Force. We work with an organization called CAPCAW, Capital Area Council of Governments. It's the 10-county region of municipalities and government agencies, county government within the capital area, just like it sounds. And they help us with shared resources, state funding, et cetera, right? And it's a place where we can gather and coordinate across the region. In addition to that, we work with federal agencies. So I just came back from a conference where I worked with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency with the Office of Bombing Prevention. And so, I feel like I'm name dropping. There's a laundry list. There's no way I could list everyone.
A
But
bunch of
on
folks.
the government side, we work with everybody, right? And on the non-government organizations, community-based organizations, we really want to be working with as many people as we can. The more information that we're getting, the better sense that we have of what's happening on the ground, the more we can, calibrate our resources to respond to that. And that doesn't mean that, again, government is going to come in and do everything, because we cannot. It's going to be a partnership where it's like, I've got a widget and you've got a widget. Together, we've got two, we can do more.
So it sounds like you guys are kind of filling that blank a little bit. You're trying to make sure that there's at least a hub of, like, let's put all this together and then we can disseminate, versus this left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing.
That's exactly right. We are a coordinating body of departments and agencies.
Love it. I
Yeah.
love it. So you mentioned earlier, and I was going to bring this up. So lots of people are talking about the fires in LA and the traffic jams and like folks having to literally escape on foot, and it's devastating. But like I all I can think about are the unhoused population. So how do we how do we take care of our unhoused people when it comes to emergencies?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the most important things that we have are dedicated city resources. A group called the Homeless Strategy Office. So they're an office within management services, just like our team. A whole group of staff over there who really help manage that, and they are incredible. And they work with service providers across the city, again as a force multiplier to help make sure that people get information. We have a distribution list that they send information to. There's a texting system that they use to get emergency information out. So if there's going to be, rain, right, that often means that those culverts will fill up, and that's where a lot of encampments can be. So we want to make sure people know that, the potential for flash flooding is there so that they can move themselves out of harm's way. During cold weather, we activate what are called cold weather shelters. And the threshold for that is if it's 35 degrees or below, according to the National Weather Service, the Camp Mabry location, those shelters open. So you saw last week, we housed over 1,500 people in those cold weather shelters. And so the homeless strategy team works with the contractor, and they help manage the first 300 guests when it comes to sheltering for cold weather. And then for surge operations, our team comes in and helps. So it doesn't mean that the city's capacity is only 300, but we kind of break it up so that the contract for those first 300 is managed one way, and then we come in and help with surge operations. And we talk about folks that we work with. I mean, the places that we house for these shelters are city facilities. So you've got parks and library staff on the front line. Your librarian, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated heroes in America. They're
I mean,
issuing
seriously.
Narcan, helping kids find books, housing the homeless. I mean, libraries are really an incredible space. They do so much. It's remarkable. But my point is that a lot of folks step in to help support the unhoused
Yeah.
in Austin, and we're just one of the resources that's available.
Speaking of weather, and cold weather shelters, isn't there like a big call where like it's like the National Weather Center? Is or am I making that up? Was that a fever dream? Did I make that
No,
up?
that's definitely
Okay.
not a fever dream. So whenever we see weather coming, we joke that we're quasi meteorologists over here. We work so closely with the National Weather Service. If we see that there's inclement weather coming in, you're exactly right. We schedule what's called a situational awareness call, and we'll pull together, our internal and external agencies, and just make sure people understand what's going on and just have a common operating picture. And then depending on what that weather forecast looks like, we change our operating posture. Oh, it looks like it's going to be cold, but there's not going to be precipitation, or looks like precipitation is on the forecast. So what can we do? And that would lead to things like now our partners at Transportation Public Works are going to be brining or preparing roads. TxDOT might be preparing roads. So we use that weather forecast to help us understand what impacts there might be, and then we try to mitigate those impacts and or inform and at least inform the public of what those impacts will look like. So that's an important part of sort of planning for emergencies.
Okay, so I knew I didn't make that up. So, um, in emergencies, emotional and mental health can sometimes be just as important as physical health and physical safety for many people. Do you guys integrate mental health services into your emergency response plans?
100%. So when it comes time to train our shelter managers around mental health, because you've got folks coming in different states. So if you have a cold weather shelter where you're bringing in folks for the unhoused, you may have someone who um, they're having a mental health experience, or they may be on some sort of substance and coming down from that. So you've got a lot going on there in that space. So we want to make sure that our shelter managers have some training for that. And then when it comes to disaster response, or living through a disaster, Uri was probably one of the most stressful weeks of my life, and I've lost parents, so it was incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
And so part of our Ready Together training, we actually do a whole section on mental health and disaster response, and it has led I got to tell you, it's just some of the most surprising and interesting discussions. So if you've not attended one of those Ready Together trainings, the schedule's already up. Again, readycentraltexas.org. You can register any of those times or flavors of disaster that resonate with you. Each and every one, we do a section on mental health, and we bring in a gal. She's a wonderful human being. Her name is Frances Acuna, and she works with Go Austin, Vamos Austin. And she was on the front lines during some of the flooding that happened in Dove Springs. And she usually teaches that section. And just
Yeah.
her personal story of, surviving those floods and what that looked like for her and her neighbors is incredible. And so, I think hearing from people just like you who've gone through things and how they survived them is really impactful. And then in addition to that, there are a lot of resources to help people. So it's huge. And I think we don't acknowledge, in so many places in our society, we don't acknowledge the impacts of mental health and post-traumatic stress, and emergencies are no different.
Yeah. I think that also goes to when we don't talk about it and we don't talk about the fallout and how this affects us mentally, then it creates a system of untrust. It creates this like, well, we can't trust you because this is what happened last time, and we were alone last time, and it makes it difficult to move forward and to protect people moving forward if there is this feeling of distrust in the system, and I'm putting those in heavy quotation marks. You know what I mean? So I like that you guys at least are like, yeah, we talk about it, we train about it, we try to keep these conversations happening because it feels like it's still something that's whispered for some reason among a lot of communities. And there's just, we living in some weird times. So we need to be having these conversations. So you mentioned earlier about the tons of green space that we have here. And all of this space is highly at risk for wildfires too. So is there anything when you're thinking about the LA wildfires, how are you feeling about that right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we have, like I said, we're really lucky here. We have a dedicated, wildfire division. And if you've met with Chief Stewart, she's probably one of the most passionate, capable firefighters I've ever had the pleasure of working with. So I
Yeah.
feel I feel like we are in good hands with Chief Stewart, and the work that she and her team do to help with prevention and education. But every time we see a disaster around the country, there's something that myself personally, and I know my colleagues are looking at and learning from. Here locally, we have what's called Warren Central Texas. It's that regional warning system, and you can sign up for it at warrencentraltexas.org. It's really important because whenever we need to page out to people that you need to evacuate or you need shelter in place or whatever the case may be, that's the system that we use to page out from. And so what you just saw hit the news in LA, they had sent out a message telling folks to evacuate from LA County, but there was a software issue with their system. And so, things like that happen. Listen, these things could very easily happen here. I'll be honest with you. I one time sent out a test message to 1.6 million people on accident on our local system. I'm telling on myself, if you got that message, I'm sorry. The
I
stakes were
remember
much
that.
lower, because it was a test message. The stakes were much lower, but it did get some media coverage. So
Wait,
if
remind
we
me what the message was. Oh, I remember this. What was the message about?
Listen, I don't blocked it out. I don't even remember now. It was so traumatizing. But I bring it up to say, listen, these are people managing these emergencies, and people are fallible, right? And so it is often the first place we look to blame when something doesn't go well. The emergency management team, they didn't have it. I'm like, everything is melted. There is no radio system. If you look at the Lanai fires in Hawaii or the Marshall fires that happened in Colorado, all the infrastructure is gone. There are no cell phone. There is no internet. There is no way to
Yeah,
communicate with each other. The radio towers that we use our backup communicate. I told you about those amateur radio people. They come in and they help. Well, if there are no radio towers because they have all burned down, we still
exactly.
can't communicate. So at some point, we reach a point where all of this planning and all of this, preparation, we reach a point where it fails too. So what that means is, as we look forward to the future, that's what we have to do. We have to adjust. We have to adapt. Not only do we need to adjust how we respond to the issues that come with climate change, we have threats happening at an incredible level that are man-made that we've never seen before. So government is having to adjust to respond to the new face of what these disasters look like.
Jeez. That's the other thing I think that people need to try to keep in mind. It's going to keep changing. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, but I am saying that we are seeing events that every year it feels like we've never seen anything like that. We've never seen an event like this happen. And so I think that, I think that's something that we just need to be cognizant of when we're thinking about how to be prepared and thinking about the fallout and thinking about weather and thinking about climate. That's all I'm saying about it.
That's exactly right. I mean, like I said, it used to be that we would activate one time a year. In 2024, we activated the Emergency Operations Center 10 times. It's a combination of planned events. So you've got your special events, you've got presidential visits, an election, an eclipse, and then you've got your unplanned, your weather events, right? So that's almost once a month we're activating.
Yeah.
And that's just a huge amount of time and resources to ensure the safety of our community. So it's important that we do it. It's important that we're there. And it's also, it's a lot for staff.
It sounds like a lot. One more time, can you just give us the information about how Austinites can stay informed about the emergencies or warnings in their area?
Absolutely. There's a lot of resources for folks to be able to stay informed before and during emergencies. So from a preparedness perspective, check out readycentraltexas.org. It's our digital hub where people can get information about all types of hazards and how to prepare. You can get information about where our pop-ups and our trainings are. All of that is on readycentraltexas.org. We also have an app. So if apps are your thing, you can download Ready Central Texas app onto your iPhone or your smartphone. And then you can also go to warncentraltexas.org and sign up to get emergency alerts. That way, whenever we need to ask you to shelter in place or evacuate or alert you that there's some sort of hazard going on, you will get those notifications. If you have someone in your family who is deaf or deafblind or has literacy issues, they can sign up for AHOS. So again, if you go to Ready Central Texas, it'll show you how to do that. But that AHOS is where you can get information in American Sign Language for emergency alerts. And then during an emergency, we activate our alerts page, which is austintexas.gov/alerts. And let's say you've got 5% battery on your phone and you need to know really important information right now. That is the one place I would tell you to bookmark and save. That's the place where we translate information into 14 languages, and we only put critical life safety information on that site. If you really need to know what's going on, you only got a couple minutes worth of service or juice to get that information, you can get it quickly and in the type of language that you need.
Sarah, thank you so much for being here with me today. This was awesome. I'm sure I'll be messaging you to come back again. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Austin. You can find a link in our show notes to HESM's website where you can sign up for emergency alerts. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Austin newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye, y'all.